Kyle here from All Media Reviews. I'm going to do another Pepe Deluxe video. I am working on 1991. Hopefully I can get that out by Friday, Friday or Saturday, but we'll see. And I'm looking to do a calendar update, probably sometime, because there's some stuff coming out this Friday. We'll see, maybe Friday, if not sometime next week. And then, of course, the anniversaries for June are coming up as well. But anyway, since we're leading up, this is Pepe Deluxe album number 2, week 2, leading up to the album Comix Sonix on June 21st. The 6th album, so that'll be the 6 weeks. So today we're going to talk about the second Pepe Deluxe album, Beatitude, which came out August 26, 2003. There's some stuff about the membership. Here it is. It's a lot, you know. You compare this to the first album, Super Sound, and there's definitely a little more artsy creativity with sort of images and, you know, references and, you know, I mean, to some degree. But what I'm wanted to also mention is I don't, according to Wikipedia, he wasn't, Paul Malmstrom wasn't an official member at this point, but he's on here. He influenced some of these songs, so he was involved. James Spectrum, of course. So Beatitude, when I got into Pepe Deluxe in 2012, I did check out this album and the one after it, the one that was before Queen of the Wave, which we'll be talking about next week, Spare Time Machine. And I like some of this album. There's one track, though, which isn't even the proper track list, that stood out. It stands out the most among this record. There's some other really good songs on it, but it's a song, Vamos Muchachos, which it's in Spanish. You know, I mean, I was trying to find the lyrics in here, and I couldn't. But Vamos Muchachos, it's like Muchachos. It's chanted. I mean, I'll get into that song in a minute, but just definition. What does it translate to exactly in Spanish? Come on, guys. Come on, boys. Come on, guys. So yeah. But it's not on. It's track number, is it 16 or 17? So it's track number 17. So as you can see, there's only 14 tracks on here. But of course, on Spotify, the actual track list is actually 19 tracks on Beatitude. It's one of those deals, of course, a CD era thing that they did frequently, where they list a bunch of hidden tracks at the end. Galactic Cowboys did it at least once, maybe twice. Their first 2 records. A lot of bands did it. This has, whatever, an additional 5 tracks. It's kind of a little bit of a suite of sorts. So, anyway, so I'll get into it. The first 14 proper tracks. So there's the song Just Let Go, which has an opening narrative, and then you hear this echoing, "Hey babe, what's your sign?" Like someone talking. So, I mean, you think about Super Sound was a lot of like trip hop and some hip hop, drum and bass, beat, you know, break beat. They're still bringing some of that in, but what there was clearly to me, they're starting to use more instrumentation, more guitar, more other instruments, and more kinds of vocals. But this song was, you know, still used some of the voiceovers. You know, it has a groove. There's a keyboard featured part at one point, multiple keyboards actually, and then it has like this indietronica atmospheric vibe to it, kind of spacey, kind of dreamy, very 70s-ish. I think of Pepe Deluxe in the quote-unquote indietronica genre with Apes and Androids, Lay to the Pier. There's a lot of the band, Opera House. The band's in that. I've done more than one entry on the blog. I've never done a video on indietronica. I probably will at some point. But while I wouldn't classify Pepe Deluxe as overtly electronic and, you know, of that ilk, there's a lot of it in there still. And, you know, this album has a fair amount of it. So, you know, their keyboards, 21st Century Keyboards Band, in this case, 21st Century Keyboards Band sounding like something from the 60s and 70s. So the second track is Salami Fever. I think this was a single. I could be wrong, but it's got this funky skipping texture where it's a mixture of, like, it sounds like a guitar and like a DJ skipping. So, you know, on a turntable. That's where the more breakbeat comes in. Then there's a riff in here that sounds a lot like Frankenstein from the Edgar Winter Band. I think it's a reference. I'm pretty sure it's a reference, although I don't think they actually gave credit to Edgar Winter Band. But and part of this song almost reminds me of Matt Mahaffey of Self, speaking of indietronica, who's involved with a lot of that style. He had a band called Wired All Wrong, which the truth is I've never fully been able to get into nearly as much as his other stuff. But they do some of the breakbeat stuff. Then this is a few years before Wired All Wrong put out their one record. But some of this reminded me a little bit of Wired All Wrong. Some of the vocal distortion sounded kind of robotic. But the groove, the dynamics, and the scratching, skipping sound, I'm not sure. Some of it might be on guitar. Some of it might not be. Kind of gives this song's identity, this song Salami Fever. So the third track is Ask for a Kiss. This one I'm almost certain was a single. It may have been a video for it. It's one of the kind of, after Vamos Muchachos, is one of the 3 tracks I think of this album the most for. Has this pretty acoustic guitar. It's dreamy. The female vocals are super dreamy. And then I believe it's a male singer who goes, "Why do you treat me like this when I only ask for a kiss?" And that's like echoed throughout a couple different verses. That's really like a chorus. But the organ sound is totally vintagey. I mean, this to me is like the first track that I think of what Pepe Deluxe sort of became after what they were doing on Super Sound and some of this album. This is like a foreshadowing to what they would do even more down the road to some extent. Pepe Deluxe are very eclectic, and they have, you could say, about a dozen different styles. But one of their styles is very much channeling the 60s, channeling vintage instrumentation, the sounds of those instruments. And the organ they may have been an older organ, because that's kind of been their MO, really, maybe since this point, that the two guys, when, I don't know if it was Paul Malmstrom or it was Jane Spector, both of them just had that idea, we got to start using old instruments and channeling the past. So, but yeah, Ask for a Kiss is a terrific track. So the fourth track, Girl, this one I know I've seen the video for. Has some African-American guy or whatever, black gentleman doing the vocals. He's in the video. But this one is funky, though. And the synths, it's like this little fat synth. Almost reminds me of like Herbie Hancock from, well, I think of just from the album that, the funk fusion album that everyone knows him for. Watermelon Man is on it. We'll just think of that particular track. Headhunters. It's like a Headhunters thing almost in some ways. But the soulful vocals, Girl. See, I'm thinking that the track before is more female vocals, but this one is with this more like deeper, soulful, it's like a baritone. He's talking about cheating me and everything like that. Sounds kind of like a Lou Rawls or almost like a Sam Cooke. He's got a great just aperture, very, very clean vibrato in the vocal performance on this song. Then there's like some trippy panning effect on, which almost sounds like a xylophone or maybe a sitar at points. And then the funky synth comes back in. It's like a bed. It totally makes the song kind of flow really well. The vocals stand out, and some narrative about a girl. I know the vocals, the lyrics are about some woman who's unfaithful. I'm not sure, but it's excellent. It's I can see why this was a single. It's like a quirky yet dreamy track, and with lots of layers. At the very end, it has like this static. I don't know if it's coming from a turntable or they just, static. You can use that as a sort of a texture. But anyway, so that's track number 4. Am I getting myself? No, I'm thinking of track 5. So the static. I apologies. I was going on to the 5th track. That was Little Miss Cypher. So backtrack here. Yeah, I mean, basically what on Girl, beyond the vocal performance, beyond the fat synths, the trippy, it's trippy, but the funk still remains with it. Jeez, because I listened to this a couple hours ago. I was like trying to, I mean, Girl is a song I've listened to many times, but it's been probably a couple years. Really when I was listening to more Pepe Deluxe when the last album came out, Phantom Cabinet. Anyway, so track number 5, Little Miss Cypher, which is later reprised on another track, but you get this rotary phone call beginning, little tone, and then you get this kind of slow, methodical synths. But eventually it builds and you get some vocals, some female vocals, sounding like they're singing in like a different language actually. I'm not sure if it's something they did with the vocals or if it's a different language. You know, the lyrics for this album, and even in the book, I mean, I can show some of it, aren't really in here. There's credits, and of course they go by pseudonyms, some of the guys. It doesn't say James Spectrum. But, see, as you can see here, I mean, I would love this album to come on vinyl. It might happen. You know, love the album after it. You know, all the records that haven't come on vinyl, the first three, really. I don't know, Super Sound I probably would end up buying, too, because I just love this band so much. Pepe Deluxé. So, yeah, and there's like a story they reference a bunch of different things. Well, there's the cruel youth, but I don't know if these are the actual lyrics. But they talk about Jules Verne in here, and then one of his novels, and a scientist. The thing is, it talks about like traveling in time. So this kind of is like the first of two records in some ways. I mean, they're all connected. There's like, it's almost like the record after, I'll get into it, Spare Time Machine, was like a sequel to this. You know, you see like amplifiers in the middle of the desert, and then these pictures of these guys from like the Roaring 20s or something like that. But somewhere, I can't remember, somewhere in here they reference Jules Verne. I'm gonna like interrupt the Earth's second moon. Here it is. This thing right here. So, yeah, I mean, they're the two guys, both of them, Spectrum and Malmstrom, are like students of history and literature. But yeah, I mean, it's Eric Gomez. They've always had so many different singers. Like, if you took a catalog list of all the vocalists on the Pepe Deluxe catalog, even though they only had 5 albums at this point, I bet the list is like 30 or 40. Because, I mean, a lot of the vocalists sound the same, but they're not the same singers, I don't think. So, anyway, getting back to Little Miss Cypher, some of the vocals get distorted, and the singer's named on this album, on this track, rather, Little Miss Cypher, is Amanda. It's capital A's throughout the way that she writes her names, a little bit like Tune Yards did. A lot of pitch bending around the 4-minute marks with a string arrangement. But yeah, this is the track that gets kind of quirky, but yet it's dreamy still. And then they use the static. I meant to say that for this track, Little Miss Cypher, not the last track, Girl. Anyway, so number 6, Daddy's Blazing Barbecue, or BBQ. So this is basically an instrumental track. Yeah, mostly. And it's got this driving Hammond B. It sounds like a Hammond B3 organ. Very 60s sounding. It's like, you know, Keith Emerson, like, almost like with the Nice, some of it, or a little bit like the early ELP. But yeah, it's mostly organ-led. You have some drums that are very tight in the back, like jazzy drums, you know, on the snare drum or anything like that. Toward the end, you get a little bit of distorted guitar, but some fuzz too. And then you have this old-timey blues ending, you know, kind of I don't know if it's just the guitar parts, but Daddy's Blazing Barbecue is one of the better tracks on here. I think it just fits from a sort of, with that vintage sound, the composition, and the mood it creates. So number 7, Black Cadillac. This one has a bit of like a Western, almost more Coney sounding element to it. Some vocals come in. It's a male singer. He has, you know, a couple lines, coming to take you back. They're kind of like, I couldn't place who he reminds me of. It's like thinking Billy Idol or Chris Isaak or something like that. Or some 80s singers I'm not thinking of. Doing a throwback sounding kind of vocal style, rather. Yeah, it's almost like something out of a Tarantino film. So that's like the first 2 or 3 minutes. And then there's a guitar solo that's very heavy on the wah-wah pedal that's very bluesy. Then the line comes in, little girl, been so bad, so, I don't know if he says, so the life. Little girl, comma, been so bad, so he takes a breath, been so bad, so the life, don't want, and then eventually says, don't want to die. But, yeah, I like Black Cadillac. It's moody, it's a different kind of, but it transitions well from Daddy's Blazing Barbecue. So, yeah, good track. So number 8, A Moment in Black and White. This is a gentle piano piece, mostly. Kind of cinematic sounding. It's 4 minutes and 9 seconds, but I didn't get a ton more from it. You know, I think this one also was pretty much all instrumental, but it's a more mood piece. You know, kind of fits. You know, the middle of the record's getting more moody than the sort of catchiness of some of the earlier tracks like "Girl" and "Ask for a Kiss." Anyway, so number 9, Real Simple. This is an unusual track. It starts out with acoustic guitar. I mean, everything's unusual about Pepe Deluxe, but then the guitar's kind of in the background. It's kind of starting slow. The vocals mostly are kind of in the background. You hear like a kazoo. Reminds me of the band which came later, which was only a couple years later than this, Kunik, who later became Other Lives, where they kind of sing really lightly. I mean, they're not drugged out. They're not kind of sleepy, but it fits the kind of atmosphere and vibe of this song. I guess you could say it's a string of kind of moody tracks, a different kind of mood. But the line, if you're trying to make me feel so uneasy, he almost sings it in an accent. He sings it really slow. I'm not even going over it nearly as slow as the singer does. Then he says it don't write bay among some other lyrics in here. So, but there's some cello included and some piano in the second half. It's a bit of a slow burn, but he does say the phrase "make me feel so simple." The cello and the violin in the outro you hear. I'm pretty sure it's violin. It's either that or multiple cellos. Adds something. It comes up high. It's mixed a little higher than the rest of the song, or when the cello comes in a little earlier than that. But it's okay. Real simple. I like moments of it. It has its points, but it's not as standout compared to some of the rest of the songs on this record. So number 10, Indifference. Now this one I like more. It starts out with this female French singer. She's singing in French. It sounds like kind of like Air. There's some distorted power chords, which aren't like in your face, but they're there enough where it kind of powers the song along. And then there's this building drum part in the background you hear. Then around 125, you get this synth part that comes in. It almost sounds like a mixture of harpsichord and organ. That part's really moody. It works. It's kind of progressive. It's like a prog piece or prog section, you could say, in the song Indifference. But then you get more of the French female vocals that remind me of Air, and the distorted guitars come back. So it's only a 2.5 minute song, 2:32, but it's one of the better tracks on here, Indifference. So number 11, Lying Peacefully. Another, like Real Simple, this was another slow tempo. It has this fat, wide 70s sounding synths and some keyboards. And the drums sound like there's a snare drum, but it sounds like it's programmed. Unfortunately, I wouldn't be surprised if some of the drums were programmed and not done by a real drummer on here. But that's kind of what they were going for at points. But the vocals get pretty dreamy. The line "I'm lying peacefully when you can talk to me, you can really talk to me." She brings out that the word "me," and she uses that, and then uses the exact same. Basically like process in the next couple of verses, just changing a couple of the words. I'm talking peacefully. I've been singing peacefully. And then the outro has some horns that are brought in at the end, which are nice. I like Lying Peacefully. It's a mood track still, but I think it works better than some of the other mood tracks on this record. But it's slow tempo. It's not something I would get energy from or get really excited about. Anyway, so then the 12th track I mentioned, Little Miss Cypher's reprised. It's fine. It basically brings the motif from Little Miss Cypher and just brings that. It's just all in strings. Although Little Miss Cypher, I believe, used strings as well. So it really is just a pure reprise of an instrumental part of Little Miss Cypher. So that's the 12th track. So then the 13th track, Cruel Youth, sounds like it might start with a mandolin, but then it has some horns and some piano. Kind of post-rock. This sounds the most post-rock maybe among any track on here. I'm hearing like moments of like Phenomena, like from Under an Hour. I'm like totally was thinking of the arrangements with the little piano textures, and some of the synths and some of the it's subtle. And the drums. The drum part later adds something. It sounds a little bit like Chroma Key. So I was like thinking Phenomena, Chroma Key, that atmospheric kind of textures, which, again, mood track, but again, it's a higher quotient mood track, if there is such a thing. It's very atmospheric, though. The faster tempo, the tempo picks up in about the middle of the song, and there's female vocals that come in around 2 minutes, and about 3 minutes of fun call and response guitar riff and voice, which works. Eventually you hear some of the skipping, pitch bending on the guitars I think you heard. I want to go back here. on Salami Fever. I don't know if that's supposed to be a reprise of Salami Fever or not, but kind of similar, not identical. And then they bring in some tablas and this panning Doppler effect, and more female vocals. You cruel man, will keep them company. I think that's what she says, among some other things I didn't catch. So then the 14th track, voice is cracking, my apologies. First Goodbye, the longest song on the record, it's almost 8 minutes. The last sort of proper track in this track list here. First Goodbye, it's kind of interesting. Kind of a dichotomy of words there. Western, it's Western sounding, it's kind of happy at the beginning. It's got this light female chanting, da-da, da-da-da. And then Tonight, words like I will cry, and I just want to die. It kind of plods along, but it's playful. I mean, I said it's 8 minutes, but I'll get to why it's really not 8 minutes. So in terms of the track length, it's the longest on this album, but it's not actually that long. But with some keys and lead bass, and then there's a string section that kind of swoons. Yeah, it's got this kind of... It sounds kind of like an album closer in a lot of ways. So saying, first Goodbye... The line say goodbye, and you hear some drum parts. It's about the 4 minute marks, and then you get about 4 minutes of silence, which leads up to the sort of, second act or last act or final act or, the bonus act. The last, the last 5 tracks technically. So you have the intro, Numa, N-U-M-A, Vamos Muchachos, the best track on the whole record. Beatitude, the title track, and then an outro. So an intro is just some trumpet for 22 seconds with a vaudevillian announcement. It's kind of neat. It fits, of course, Pepe Deluxe being like a 20. This looks like something from the 1920s, really, or earlier. So then Numa, which is 3 minutes and 35 seconds, is like it's like an East Indian almost Bollywood piece with percussion. I don't know if it's sitar or something else, or just synths. It's mostly string arrangements and synths, or maybe just pure synths that sound like strings. But very tasteful and mystical. I mean, it sounds kind of Bollywood-esque. When you say that Bollywood, instrumental Bollywood arrangement, people pretty much know what I'm referring to if they've ever seen any Bollywood movies. So then Vamos Muchachos. It's like they're like bringing in different ethnicities between East Indian. Vamos Muchachos is almost like you want to say either Spanish or Mexican or something from South America maybe. But Vamos Muchachos is, and I've listened to this song for the better part of 12 years since I've been a fan, and it's a banger. It's a top 10 Pepe Deluxe track for sure. Fuzz guitar is great. It's, all the vocals aren't in Spanish, but there's some sound clips that kind of fit the sort of mood and style and the ethnic, almost Latin sounding, element of this song. But it's super catchy. It's an earworm. You'll have it in your ears for like hours. It's got this danceable rhythm, and then the staccato. Probably the highlight of the whole track to me has always been the staccato performance of which is like a bridge. It's a saxophone, or it's multiple sax parts eventually. It's just do 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 do. I can't really mimic a sax that well, but that's the gist of it, and it just kind of. You can't help just get bobbing your head or just tapping your toes to it. It's just infectious, and it's got clapping in it, some twanging guitar. It's a fantastic. I'll say this: Pepe Deluxe has never done a song anything like it. Really, it really wouldn't fit on Queen of the Wave. It wouldn't. They were probably just kind of writing songs in different styles and just whatever. But it still works within the whole confines of this record because it just. You're giving a really cool gem. The only thing is you got to listen to almost like 45 minutes of music or whatever before you get to it, or 50 minutes. So after that, Beatitude, the 18th track, the title track, isn't like the intro to the guitar. It's like the polar opposite of Vamos Muchachos, and it's very slow and just sounds a little bit like Maudlin of the Well. There's a couple of Maudlin of the Well tracks from Bath and Leaving Your Body Map that the plucking sounds very similar to it. Very light plucking. But then you get some keys, and it gets very jazzy. So almost like a Gene Krupa or a Max Roach. Just that really tight sort of, very busy, tight, progressive, snare and hi-hat work. It's just fantastic drum work on this song. Some sound effects, some echoing, and then you get some female vocals with distortion. It's the vocals, yeah, I mentioned here later, it reminds me a little, among others, Doves have a song, the song Hold Me Gently, they did that, where they're it's like using those effects, and it's not, it is the only vocal part in that. People Ask, No One. You have what sounds like a harp at one point, and then you get that little plucking again that sounds like Maudlin of the Well. But the vocal effect, yeah, as I mentioned, it's rather trippy at times, and then what ends up being an ending, it sounds like the use of flute, or it might be just a synthesizer that sounds like a flute, and then a gong hit. So, for being the title track, it's some title tracks are hit and miss. Sometimes they're the best song on the record, sometimes they're kind of forgettable. It's a decent track. I don't think it's in the top 5, but it's still, it adds to the quality of the record at the end of this ending suite or whatever. So the last track is just an outro for 16 seconds. Has the line, a voiceover line. So until we meet again on the third album. So that's what I'm saying. I think that there's some connections, and I'll maybe try to go through that next week when I go over Spare Time Machine. But I gave this 4 stars a couple years ago. Maybe I was doing that other video on Pepe Deluxe. I don't know if this album quite deserves 4 stars. It's better than 3 stars. It's probably at least 3.5, because you go down the list of songs I like versus that are just sort of mood, or that aren't even the best mood tracks. You have Girl, you have Ask for a Kiss, you have Vamos Muchachos, then you have songs like Indifference and Lying Peacefully. And even, a little Cypher. There's a bunch of songs that just still add to its charm. I don't find comparably it's quite as cohesive. It still works, but it's not as sort of, I don't revere this record from a cohesive element. I think it's a concept album, but because there are all these quotes and everything about it, but I think most of the records are concept albums, and maybe all of them actually. But the concept is sort of a collage of different demographics and times in history. A desert. Is this supposed to be a desert? Or maybe it's like a hill with these guys from the 20s, and then these amplifiers. So, and they talk about time travel. I think Pepe Deluxe, the guys are very much students of history, of time, of the different eras of pop culture and fashion and science especially. And so I think with Super Sound, they were so more leaning toward the trip hop and the DJ kind of element. This one, they really found, no, we want to use more instrumentation and write some songs that kind of explore different styles. And it somehow is still cohesive. It is their sort of maybe one of their detriments in that you tell people to check them out and they're not sure because they're a little too not avant-garde, but they're too diverse in some ways. But I just think from a songwriting standpoint, it still works. But, 3.5 to 4 stars, people would, if you're giving out a 10, I don't like to give number ratings, really. I'm not one number ratings person typically. But it would be like 7.7 out of 10 or something, because it's almost 8, but not quite. Like, there are 8-star records I definitely would choose first, but it's definitely stronger than some records that are 3.5 or 7 stars. So, have you heard Beatitude? I'll leave a link on, of course, Spotify. But yeah, thank you for watching, and what's your take if you have heard Beatitude? But next week is Spare Time Machine. I got 1991 coming up, hopefully in a few days. And thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.